actually are dumping water into the Pacific rather than using it to grow things. Why, you say, Mark? Why? Because nature, that's why. We can't have walnut trees in areas where nature didn't have walnut trees. It's this kind of insane ideology. And it's not just that. They're against aqueducts. You know, one of the greatest things that ever happened in California, the construction of aqueducts, which brings water from one part of the state, or even the country, to another part. Well, they've actually shut down aqueducts because they're not natural. And water shouldn't flow that way. And every other unimaginably stupid idea that you can possibly come up with. This horrendous situation in California, Governor Newsom slaying Donald Trump's disinformation about the California wildfires. What disinformation? Place is burned up because this clown, he has time to literally sit down with MSNBC, Meet the Press, in a self-serving interview. This man was lieutenant governor for 8 years. He's been governor for 6 years. That's 14 years as a top executive of that state. And he has done next to nothing to protect the people of that state. What has he done? We've seen him the last 4 years. He spent a lot of time outside of California, campaigning, basically running for president, going to the White House, going to the media, debating Ron DeSantis. And so, meanwhile, there were wildfires in California. Meanwhile, there were warnings. Meanwhile, he changed budget priorities, just like the mayor of LA, a Castroite, changed budget priorities. We've got fire trucks that don't work. We have a reservoir that didn't have the proper cover, so they decided to fix it at the height of wildfire season. 1.7 million gallons of water, something to that effect. Maybe it's even more. So it was dry before the fire even started. I mean, these things were not created by nature. They were created by him. Leftists, ideologues, phony climate changers who howl at the moon. And here he is talking at Meet the Press, this MSNBC knucklehead. Go.
Do you have faith in Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass?
I have absolute faith in our community. I have faith in our leaders. I have the faith of our capacity to work together.
President-elect Trump has blamed you for this crisis. He called you incompetent. What's your response?
Well, I called for him to come out, take a look for himself.
Okay, come out, take a look for yourself. Doesn't it kind of underscore that you're an incompetent boob? Come out, take a look for yourself. Looks like Hiroshima after the bomb dropped, or Nagasaki. Come out, take a look. And all these Clintonite mannerisms, Clinton stuff and so forth. You know what he is? He's, as I've said before, he's the Justin Trudeau of California. That's what he is. A pretty boy with an IQ below a rock. Go ahead.
We want to do it in the spirit of an open hand, not a closed fist. He's the president-elect. I respect the office. We have a president of the United States that within 36 hours provided a major disaster declaration over a text.
Major disaster declaration. Wow, that's great. Piece of paper. A major disaster declaration. Is that going to give people their homes back? Their lives back? People are dead? What is he talking about? And notice the environment as a result of these environmentalists. The air is filthy. The water's filthy. Look at the countryside. As I've said before, if you are going to operate as a governor or a legislature or as a person in charge of these sorts of things through an ideology and not through science and not through knowledge and not through experience and common sense, this is what's going to happen. So you don't clean the forest floors. You don't make sure there's enough water in the fire hydrants in case there's an emergency. You don't resolve these things because they're not flashy. People don't vote for it. And yet we've seen where it works when it's done with Ron DeSantis in Florida. We know there's going to be hurricanes. We know there's going to be hurricanes next year. We know some are worse than others. They're devastating. You can't change it by throwing around the phrase climate change, that it's an existential threat. And so in order to change this, you have to be poor, you have to live in smaller quarters, you have to drive electric vehicles. What is this, 1,000 years ago of stupidity? Praying at false idols? This is a kind of religion. These Democrat politicians, especially the worst of them, whether they believe this stuff or not, this is their politics. And their politics is destructive. It destroys things. It destroys our economy. It destroys progress and modernity. It destroys lives and lifestyles. And they're okay with that. As Mark said, a little bit of despotism, it happens from time to time to get to where we want to go. Go.
We had support from the President of the United States, Joe Biden, with 100%.
And by the way, there should be no support without strings attached. For the sake of the people of California, if the rest of us are going to help them, and we should, then we have to go over the heads of these buffoons, or these ideologues, these incompetents. We have to go over their heads and say, okay, we're going to help you rebuild. We're going to help these people who are suffering, who've lost everything. But we can't help them through these fools. In other words, we can't write checks and give them to the very people. What happened to the $2 trillion in the climate change bill, the so-called Inflation Reduction Act? How come that didn't help? Because they didn't use that money that way. That's why. They're busy handing out massive amounts of money to their billionaire friends to start phony corporations. They're busy handing them out to radical left-wing organizations, non-governmental organizations. That's why they didn't build EV charging stations and on and on and on. Doesn't matter how much you spend, how much inflation you create, how much taxation and regulation there is. These people are fools. They're ideologues. And so, no, we should not hand a blank check and say, okay, fix things, because they don't fix things. They burn them down. It should be here. Now, this is what you're going to do with the money. This, and this. And that is a righteous thing to do. That's not political. It's not penalizing. It's helping. It's helping the people on the ground where this clown could not. Go.
All the resources you could hope for or imagine, constant communication. I'd like to extend that to the president-elect. I don't know what he's referring to when he talks about the Delta smelt and reservoirs. The reservoirs are completely full, the state reservoirs.
I'll tell you what he's referring to, you moron, and we all know it. The environmentalists, with the backing of California, they bring these cases involving these so-called endangered species. The smelt, it's like this, and the farmers have complained about this for over a decade, well over a decade. They weren't getting water in Central California, which is mostly Republican and much less populated than these metropolitan areas and so forth and so on. Very political in how they handle water, very political. They actually are dumping water into the Pacific rather than using it to grow things. Why, you say, Mark? Why? Because nature, that's why. We can't have walnut trees in areas where nature didn't have walnut trees. It's this kind of insane ideology. And it's not just that. They're against aqueducts. You know, one of the greatest things that ever happened in California was the construction of aqueducts, which brings water from one part of the state, or even the country, to another part. Well, they've actually shut down aqueducts because they're not natural. And water shouldn't flow that way. And every other unimaginably stupid idea that you can possibly come up with. So they're not big on aqueducts. They're not big on the free flow of water. They're not big on land development. They have brownouts and blackouts for the same reason. They have water shortages. They have brownouts and blackouts. Everything should go on electricity. They don't have enough electricity. Because to produce electricity, you need more than, beanies with propellers on them or battery-operated socks. Solar's not enough. It's unpredictable. Wind isn't enough. It's unpredictable. It amounts to less than 5% of the energy produced in this country. Texas did the same thing years ago. Remember what happened to them a few years ago? They weren't getting enough sun for the solar panels. They had a disastrous situation in Texas. What is it going to take? Shouldn't this be enough to expose the death knell that is this ideology on the far left? Shouldn't it be enough? It should be enough, it seems to me. And should the contrast between California and Florida be enough too? You know damn well, if DeSantis had been the governor of California, they would have been cleaning out those forests. He would have made sure the water was flowing. You know, every damn hydrant would have water pressure and water coming out. That's how he would manage it. But if it's not a priority, and it's not for them, then this is what happens. It's terrible. Go ahead.
In Southern California, that mis and disinformation, I don't think advantages or aids any of us.
It's just misinformation and disinformation. The fact that they didn't have water, they didn't have water pressure, Then they said they didn't have the electricity for the water pressure. Domino effect. It's one lie after the mis and disinformation comes from him. Go ahead.
Responding to Donald Trump's insults, we would spend another month.
Really? Responding to his insults. How about when he told you in 2017, 2018, 2019, Governor, you need to clean these forests. You need to get this fire hazard under control. We have the videos. I'm not going to play them all. We have the audios. I'm not going to play them all. We have the statements in writing. I'm not going to show you all, but they're there over and over again. And he lied. And these reporters come in unprepared or unwilling to confront him. He lied in 2021. NPR did a report on it. Others have done report on it. There are actually liberal media platforms that have reported. And what did he lie about? He lied about the amount of dead lumber, plants, fire hazards that he cleared out of the forests. He put some preposterous number out there, like 100,000 square acres, when it was 12,000. Numbers to those effect. It was absolute lie. Absolute liar. Go ahead.
I'm very familiar with them. Every elected official that he disagrees with, very familiar with them.
We do know, though, from reporting here locally that one reservoir that serves the Palisades was not full.
And that's exactly what triggered my desire to get the investigation to understand what was happening.
Hold on. So now we need to investigate whether the reservoir was empty. I need to have an investigation into this. Again, let's compare it to Ron DeSantis. Did he say, I need to investigate why we weren't prepared on this, or this? Remember, he also said when there wasn't enough water pressure in the hydrants, remember what he said? It's a local issue. That's a local issue. I'm going to investigate on the reservoirs. We're going to find out what took place here. We know what took place here. You won the day. You're a one-party state. You're a Democrat Party, one-party state, radical ideologues. You spend all your time trying to seize and centralize more and more power under your party. While all this is going on, they have a session of the California legislature that they called a special session. The Republican leader in the Senate said, there's nothing special about it. We were having a session anyway. But he makes a big deal. They call it a quote-unquote special session when they're meeting anyway, to pass a bill to spend $50 million to pay for what? Lawyers. Slip and fall California lawyers. Lawyers are the biggest or the second biggest donors to the Democrat Party nationally and in the state of California. Did you know that? They're either behind the teachers' unions or right in front of them. It's always a race between the two. So these lawyers always benefit from government. Always. They always benefit from government. And so we're going to have $50 million put aside to do what? To thwart Donald Trump at every step, whether it is issues like this, whether it's illegal immigration, whether it's transgenderism, destroying women's sports. We in California are going to fight this. Why don't you spend the $50 million on some more fire trucks? Or some more electricity so you pressure in your hydrants? Or to make sure all the reservoirs are functioning and full? That would be a great use of $50 million, but no. No, we're going to do an investigation to see what went wrong. What went wrong is you're the governor, and before that you were lieutenant governor.
For all this and much more, sign up for Levin TV.